Before we begin this Sunday address, make sure to check and see if you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. If not, subscribe now. If you think you are subscribed, check to make sure that YouTube hasn't decided to unsubscribe you. They do that to a large amount of my listeners on a daily basis. Also, make certain to hit the like button because the white supremacists absolutely hate it. Now, that said, you're familiar with the old expression that when people say it's about the money, then it's about the money. And when people say it's not about the money, then it's really about the money. Well, you go ahead and you take a look at this mass disobedience of the law that's taking place here. These are a bunch of dyed-in-the-wool white supremacists that you see doing this. This is not some sort of policy protest they're carrying out. It's a political protest, but there's also a racial tinge to all this because, of course, you got, and these are northern states, by the way, Michigan, Wisconsin, these are Yankee states, and yet you got Confederate flags being flown out there, and that's not by accident. Earlier today on my Twitter feed, I was pointing out that you had black people protesting the police murdering black citizens, and you had white politicians demanding and even happened to passing a couple of laws legalizing hitting people if the individuals doing so claim, oh, well, these guys were in the street. Now you take a look at what's happening in Lansing, Michigan. You take a place of what's happening in Wisconsin, and especially in Lansing, Michigan, you have the white supremacists being backed by certain wealthy individuals, the same clowns who bankrolled the Tea Party, which was nothing more than the let's try to lower taxes for the 1% and try to throw some shade at that black guy in the White House party. But in Lansing, Michigan, you have a particularly odious example of this. These clowns have gotten together. They went to downtown Lansing, Michigan, right in front of the Capitol building there, and they decided that they were going to deliberately cause traffic jams for the sake of trying to get as much attention for themselves as possible. Now, keep in mind, these guys were not just causing traffic jams with their cars, they also had their own nutty individuals in the streets. The police were not arresting anyone. They weren't arresting any of these individuals. The police were not rounding up anyone or impounding their cars or towing anyone. They're blatantly not practicing social distancing in front of the governor's, literally in front of the governor's mansion, doing it in front of the state assembly building. And you don't have anybody bringing in the state police. The sheriffs didn't show up. The cops didn't show up. Nobody showed up. Oh, the police were there, but they were just counting how many cars there were. That's it. Oh, how different the response is when it's not black people. See, if it's black people, they would have already had the National Guard out there. You didn't have black people causing massive traffic jams. You didn't have black people with assault rifles standing in front of any governor's mansions or in front of the state legislature. You just had black people simply chanting, saying, hands up, don't shoot. Meanwhile, you got white people out there with doggone megaphones holding up their AR assault rifles and M4 assault rifles, because, you know, nothing says peace more than a white man holding an assault rifle. I mean, God, I can't think of any times that white males have gone on rampages with AR-15s and M4 assault rifles. Can you? And yet you got these same individuals, white supremacists, one and all, standing in front of the governor, well, in front of her office and in front of the legislature on a megaphone screaming, come and take them if you can, talking about their assault rifles. Try and take them. And these people with Confederate flags and Trump 2020 banners, it's obvious this was not a protest against any sort of policy. This was a political protest and a white supremacist demonstration is what it was. And the police weren't doing anything. And they've been doing this for a few days in a row, might I add. And there's absolutely no politicians on the left, and certainly not on the right, who are authoring any legislation saying, hey, if ambulances cannot get to the hospitals, and if people are trying to get to work or trying to get home and these idiots are clogging traffic, why, you got the right to hit them, run them out of the way. They are blocking traffic, and all you got to do is just say, hey, they were in the way. Nobody's doing that when these individuals happen to be white. And the thing about it is, at least with the black protesters, they were largely standing off to the side. Because of the large numbers, you might have had a little spillover into the streets, but they were not doing it specifically for the sake of trying to block traffic and trying to cause traffic jams. These white supremacists in Michigan and Wisconsin, they were specifically trying to cause traffic jams. They were deliberately doing that. Now, there are all kinds of laws against obstructing traffic, and were they black, those laws would be enforced across the board. All of them would be in prison, social distancing being damned. There would have been mass arrests. People would be asking, hey, did these guys have a permit for their little protest? Did they get a permit for their little demonstration? Did they would be giving out names, addresses. They would want the public to understand you're not going to be doing this. But at the end of the day, this is a system of white supremacy. And as Donald Trump and before him Richard Nixon said, if a white person does it, then that makes it legal. Now, of course, what he said was if the president does it, that makes that legal. But what he meant was I'm a white man. And as such, I feel I must remind you that as a white man, the law does not touch me. The law does not apply to me. Why, down there in Florida, you got the empty-headed wannabe white supremacist, that Latino by way of Italy, Latino Ron DeSantis, the alleged governor. He's decided to announce that he's going to be reopening the beaches in Florida, which they've already done. And of course, they have the throngs of idiots out there. Social distancing being damned. He claims, oh, it's for exercise purposes. How the hell is anybody exercising when they're standing out there lying down in the sun? How the hell is that exercise? But that's the entire point. Under white supremacy, you can tell the truth, you can tell a lie, or you can say nothing whatsoever. It doesn't matter. There are no consequences. Something that needs to be remembered about these phony baloney AstroTurf protests that we've been seeing, these are only a small, noisy minority of white supremacists making noise. This ain't even a majority of white people. This is just a noisy minority being propped up by big money. A comparative handful of miscreants and misfits and loudmouths and troublemakers, just a small handful of morons. It's part of the reason why it was easy for them to all collect in one place. Ain't many of these idiots, but you got a small, mentally deranged, racist minority who are trying to make as much noise as they can. And that's the reason why these guys could not do a proper protest and they had to stand out in the street, because it's a matter of they're desperate. These are desperation tactics. These are not the tactics of individuals who know that they've got the people behind them. A majority of the country, at least according just the white media, I'm trying to put a rosy picture on it, trying to make it seem like there's some tug of war that doesn't exist. Even the white media had to admit more than 2 out of 3 Americans say the lockdown needs to continue. The shut-in needs to continue. More than 2 out of 3. So that being the case, no, this ain't some wave that's sweeping the nation. It's a small, noisy group of malcontents. But the thing is, what they're hoping to do is they're hoping to force the issue, that if they can get a couple of headlines, and, you know, it's like old William Randolph Hearst said, you supply the headlines, I'll supply the war. Well, we're trying to overthrow the government. Well, you supply the headlines, we'll supply the coup d'etat. That's what's going on. A small handful of idiots are attempting to see if they can put forward the lie that there's some huge groundswell, some huge base of support that simply doesn't exist. Talk about the tail wagging the dog. This is the racist con that they're attempting to perpetrate here. And there are many in the media who are playing along with it. Because the coronavirus has been good for ratings in both directions, as far as they're concerned, long as it gets some attention. Oh, a second civil war, that would be so exciting. Great ratings. But you take a look at these idiots, there's only a few hundred of them tops that got together in Michigan. Other places, just a few dozen of them. They ain't got nothing better to do. They ain't working, so it's not like they have an excuse for not having time to attend their little anti-government protest. It's not like they got an excuse. They ain't got nothing else that they're doing. I thought the whole point was they're not working, so they should be easy for these idiots, these inbred morons, these congenital jackasses. It should be easy for them to all get together. They ain't got nothing else to do, and yet all they could do is get together a couple hundred of them tops. Yeah, because they got this huge groundswell, just a minuscule minority of morons. That's what's going on here. But they also understand that there's a compliant white media and there happens to be a permissive white government that's going to play along to an extent. So they're going to see how much they can get away with, how much they're going to be allowed to get away with. And the first thing they have to be allowed to get away with is the lie that they've got some sort of widespread support. That, oh, there's millions of Americans. No, you pretty much saw the totality of this kookball contingent between Wisconsin and Michigan. You pretty much saw the vast majority of this gaggle of idiots. That's pretty much the bumper crop of morons right there. Let these idiots run out of moonshine and they'll calm down again. Cliven, the Klansman Bundy, was prophesying that there would be millions of people who would come to his rescue. Man, didn't a damn body show up to help him out. Not that he needed it, basically, because of the fact that he wasn't black. That basically meant it would be a tempest in a teapot. But the thing is, you see the same thing going on with these insipid, asinine little protests. They're expecting that millions would show up. See, the white supremacists don't have any sort of real grievance. They got to make up phony, baloney, fake outrage grievances that don't really exist. And it's blatantly obvious they ain't got a leg to stand on. They look like idiots. But they're trying to see if they can find a way to get the country to play along to their madness, to their idiocy. Hell, the country's been playing footsie with the lunacy of white supremacy for 500 years. So they have good reason to believe that they can pull the con one more time. Hell, the country's been falling for it all this time, playing along with it all this time. Why stop now? For half a millennium, the country's been letting a small handful of white supremacist ideologues, rabid anti-black psychotic scumbags, tell them what to do, and going along with their putrid agenda for half a millennium. As far as they're concerned, it ought to be child's play to get this one done. Never mind the fact that Florida has something on the order of over 750 deaths from the coronavirus. They've got over 25,000 people infected. By the way, for anyone who's still keeping count, because they're so concerned about the imaginary flood of black people who are going to be trying to come into Florida, I keep account of the fact that the number of non-Floridian residents who happen to be cataloged as having the coronavirus, it's pretty much holding steady at that 600 or so, 650, 690 or so. It seems to be more or less holding steady around that number. Meanwhile, the number of Florida residents who have it, man, that thing's jumping by leaps and bounds. But of course, this is not about residents versus non-residents. You can be from New York. DeSantis' ban against New Yorkers doesn't really apply as long as you're white. If you're black, on the other hand, they're going to be stopping you whether you got New York tags, Louisiana tags, or if you got tags from Mars. They're going to be stopping you no matter what. You can be coming from California. You can be coming from Alabama. You can be coming from Pennsylvania. If you're black, you're getting pulled over. Well, we need to ask you some questions. Because that's what this is about. This is about laying the groundwork for attempting to put in place entire sundown states. But you have this mass demonstration on the part of these white supremacists in government and certain wealthy private individuals who are determined that they're going to be telling the government, we got to send you a message, which is you're getting in the way of what we see as our power. See, when these clowns are claiming that this is about our rights, no, this is about money and nothing else, isn't it? Well, it's about me making a living. That's what it is. Well, but you're not really emphasizing that. You're emphasizing this is tyranny, and you got the government telling you we don't want people passing around a lethal virus. I could see it differently if the government had closed down every single business in the country, but they didn't. They said the restaurants can stay open as long as you got curbside service. If you got drive-through, you're good to go. They're just hell, you still look at the doggone highways, they are hardly empty. But what's happening is here, as I said at the very beginning of this video essay, when people tell you it's not about the money, that means it's really about the money. This about my rights. This about my rights. This about liberty. This about liberty. Yes, including the right to die, apparently. That seems to be what it is about for them. So you had a bunch of white people, and you also had some of their non-white collaborators like that Annie U character, Oh, well, just a couple of weeks ago, I told you about how she was whining and complaining that there were some black people in D.C. who were not practicing social distancing. Oh, she was up in arms. She was outraged. Quote, "What are we doing? Not good." That's what she was saying back at the beginning of the month. And meanwhile, I went ahead and made sure she was reminded that there were some Asian-owned restaurants who were proud of having people packed in there like sardines, and she had nothing to say about that. Also decided to remind her, hey, what about all of these protesters, all of these white protesters in Michigan and Wisconsin who are standing in front of the state house and they're just, forget about social distancing. These guys might as well be having a public orgy. They're so close to each other. Are we going to talk about these white folk on these beaches? They're not social distancing, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to criticize them for that too, right? Oh, that's right. We don't criticize them when they're white. When they're white, well, that makes it okay. That means it's not so bad, because it's never so bad as long as it's not a black person doing it. A mass shooting is never so bad if a white person has done it, because if it's black people, well, you had a gangbanger who shot 3 people. Oh, this is the end of the world as we know it. Meanwhile, you got a white teenager who decides that he's going to kill an entire classroom full of kids. What kind of music do you listen to? Must have been gangster rap. What kind of movies? Well, we can't invalidate the Second Amendment, and this is a public health issue. Yeah, that's right. We're immediately stepping back from that. Black people peacefully get together to protest murders of black citizens by the thugs in blue. This is a crime against the state. Meanwhile, you have real crimes against the state taking place by a bunch of white supremacists who deliberately, with malice aforethought, plan out how are we going to bring an entire city to a standstill. We're going to clog the streets, make sure emergency vehicles can't get through, first responders can't get through, people can't get to work. This is our form of political protest, and we're going to do this deliberately. No one is arrested. No one is charged. No one is held accountable. Nothing happens at all, and that's by design. You never hear about any instances whenever you have any sort of white supremacists who decide that they're going to disrupt the functions of a city and they get punished for it. That doesn't happen. Oh, somebody might get some blink and you'll miss it brush with the law, but they'll be immediately released, like that crying Nazi, whatever his name was, Chris Cantwell. Oh, he got arrested. Oh, please. He just got taken downtown so the cops could have his autograph, and that's it. None of the organizers of the alt-right rallies have ever done any real time, and they're not going to. So understand, when you have these white supremacists who do these rallies and they are these deliberate acts of criminal disruption of the society, because that's what this is. This is not civil disobedience, because there's nothing civil about it. Armed white supremacist thugs with assault rifles standing in front of government buildings, daring the government to do anything about them, and they're clogging up traffic, and they are deliberately attempting to obstruct the rights of citizens to be able to have freedom of movement. People who are trying to either get to a grocery store, or they're trying to get to their parents' homes, or they're trying to get to their own homes or some other place where they're supposed to be. And these guys are stopping people from being able to have their own right of movement. They can go anywhere they want. What they're angry about is, well, I feel as if my business is an essential business. Well, what is your business? Well, I run a flea market or a knick-knack paddywhack store, and, I think that's essential. Give me a break. So when these clowns claim, oh, this is about liberty and freedom, no, that means it's really about the money. But as I've always taught you, under white supremacy, when the dominant society talks about their freedom, what they're really talking about is their power. See, you and I, those of us who have no power at all, we're just looking to get basic rights, our right to live, our right to be able to enjoy the formal opportunities that exist, just the bare minimum stuff. That's what the hell it is that we're fighting for. So when we say freedom, we mean it in the literal sense of the term. But under white supremacy, when the dominant society uses terms like freedom and liberty and such, they're talking about their power. Oh, they have the right to walk around. They can go wherever they want. As long as you got a face mask, as long as you got some sort of face covering on, you're fine. Like, so what seems to be the problem? Well, the problem is you're interfering with my power. That's the problem. And you have certain wealthy individuals, the 1%, the Koch brothers. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, Koch sibling at this point, because one of his demonic siblings died. But you also got people like Sheldon Adelson, such as the malevolent, malicious 1%. As far as they're concerned, their money is being interfered with. And they want the government. It doesn't, casualties be damned. They could care less. I can tell you right now, the mega millionaire and multi-billionaires who paid the money to organize the media attention to help promulgate this stuff, these guys who send out the marching orders to right-wing hate radio or to false news, on Fox News, people like Robert Mercer who own influencer websites like Breitbart, these guys, this is not grassroots at all. This is AstroTurf. This began with these right-wingers, same way that they funded, financed, and propped up the Tea Party. You don't get something like this happening without big money being behind it. Black people had a hell of a lot more numbers than these white supremacist idiots, and yet you didn't have black folks being able to organize something this quickly and being able to do it right in front of the government. What does that tell you? What that tells you is a large number of these politicians, not just Republicans, but also Democrats too, but a large number of these politicians are also on board with this. This was not spontaneous at all. It was planned out. And when you see the complete lack of response from the Democrats, when you see that nobody is attempting to punish them, and that's how you know that there's a program at work. That's how you know that there's an agenda playing itself out. Are they looking to punish this behavior? Are they looking to pass laws that would make it permissible that if one of these white supremacist scumbags is attempting to impede traffic, you have no obligation whatsoever to stop for them because they're not supposed to be standing in the street to begin with? If somebody decides they're going to use their car to obstruct traffic, you have the right to move that vehicle because it's not supposed to be there. Of course not. Nobody's attempting to put laws like that on the books because they understand that a law like that would be used against white people, and the entire point of white supremacy is to immunize and to be able to inoculate those who are classified as white from any sort of legal sanction. You can't touch them by law. They're immune from the law. And the white media is going to, if not glorify it, they're going to give a tisk to it. They do not racially pathologize it. Nobody says, gee, what kind of families do these people come from? What's going on in white society that they're running around, that their idea of a political protest, a proper political protest, it's not a political protest without the assault rifles. It's not a political protest unless you show up looking like you're ready to invade downtown Baghdad. What is going on in white society that seems to be the sine qua non of their political protest? If they're not looking like paramilitary, then they're also looking like a gang of roving hooligans, and that brings us to Antifa. So on both sides, that's what you got. Now the black folks are out there acting like they got some sense. The black folks are not out there carrying assault rifles or threatening anyone or impeding traffic, and yet they call out the National Guard. As soon as they see some Negroes getting together, oh, we need the National Guard, we need the sheriffs, you need to arrest some people, let them know you better stand on the sidewalk, better not impede traffic. In fact, you better not even impede the sidewalk, and you better have a permit. You better not be getting together without a permit. Somebody needs to do something. We need to break this up. We need to break this up. And the white media is all over it. That's the reason why I was talking about Brooke Baldwin, that piece of trash. Heard that she got COVID-19. Don't know what her medical condition is. But if there is a God, well, we don't need to complete that thought, do we? But Brooke Baldwin was cheerleading for the murder of Trayvon Martin, trying to run interference for it, being an apologist for George Mad Dog Zimmerman. And the white media also decided to trash Tamir Rice. I'll never forget when Mika the Bigot Brzezinski and Joe piece of crap Scarborough were trying to blame Tamir Rice and saying, we got police reports that he took the orange tip off of that gun and that's why they shot him, and they were talking that crap all the way up until the video got released. Turns out the cops immediately opened fire as soon as they saw him, never even had an opportunity to see anything. They just saw a black male and opened fire. And then after that, those two gerbils ain't said that mess since, but they were more than happy to try to be apologists for the murder of a 12-year-old child. This is your white media. But they are not demanding that any of these white supremacists, either in Michigan or Wisconsin, be rounded up en masse and be taken off to the pokey. They're not going to do that. They're not going to cheerlead for that. The white media is not going to. It's a matter of, oh, well, how unfortunate. Well, you guys, you're not practicing social distancing, and this could make the coronavirus worse. Could make it worse. Nobody's saying anything about punishment. Now, when it's black people, it's racially pathologized. Why, we heard that there were some Negroes who had a house party somewhere on Crenshaw. Meanwhile, you got white folks in broad daylight practically having a public orgy either on the beat or in front of the Lansing State Assembly building, and nobody's sitting there saying, oh, there's something wrong with you guys. You guys are passing coronavirus. I wonder how many of you scumbags have been tested. Nobody's saying that at all. Nobody at all. That lets you know this is not a matter of a double standard. There is one standard. Black people are to be maligned, are to be criticized, are to be demonized, and non-blacks are not. That is the whole of the law. That is the American social order. A hyper-violent anti-black psychosis. That's what's at work here. Psychopathic anti-black racism. To the point that they're willing to set themselves up for their own demise. Why not? We've seen this across the board with white supremacy. They will gladly, in order to get attention off the things that are going wrong with themselves, that they are powerless to do anything about, because they've already got all the money and all the power in the world. If anybody ought to have the longest lifespans and ought to have the best health of anybody on the planet, the white supremacists shouldn't. In fact, their lifespans, though, are not really that much longer than black people. And the reason why is they have got to spend a lot of time and they've got to spend a lot of psychological and spiritual capital demonizing and attacking us. Because of the fact that they are white supremacy is based on a negative affirmation. What that means is they do not look and say, I am great because I do this. I am great because I am that. Instead, it is, we're great because we're not black people. Oh, we're good because we're not black people. Everything is based on what they are not. That's a negative affirmation. They need black people in order to trash us and demonize us because they can't feel good about themselves any other way. They don't have any sort of sense of identity. What they call their identity is just a reflexive response to us. Without us, they basically don't exist. It's part of the reason why they have to spend so much time trying to make sure they keep tabs on us and keep us corralled and keep us otherwise oppressed and repressed. They absolutely require that. That is an absolute requirement of white supremacist culture. They have to do that. They don't have any other choice. Because otherwise, they'd have to do what they did in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, which is cannibalize themselves. And as far as they're concerned, well, hell, that they're trying to keep themselves around a little bit longer. So it's a matter of, hey, come on, you know the format, you know the song, you know how it goes. Second verse, same as the first. The Negroes are the bad guys. Let's not lose sight of that. And please, for some of you simple-minded fools who bomb into my comment sections and start talking all crazy, I've been explaining to everybody for a while now. Don't be so stupid as to open your mouth and say, well, if they start reopening up the states, that means they gonna be letting up on black folks. Listen up, stupid. White supremacy sine qua non, the MO of white supremacy is that whenever they have restrictions, social strictures in place, that's supposed to be for black people. It's not supposed to apply to white people. It's supposed to only apply to us. So the reopening of these states, that's only supposed to apply to white people. What do you think it is that you got these white supremacists who are out there in Michigan and in Wisconsin and a couple other places? Why do you think it is that these scumbags are all white? You don't see any black people out there with them. It's all nothing but a whole bunch of white supremacists with Confederate flags and Trump 2020 banners. They understand that this is a white supremacist protest. This is something about them. The reopening really means we need the government to give us an exception. Now, the black folks, we're going to be keeping tabs on them because the white media has already pushed the line that, oh, well, this whole COVID-19 thing, this actually has to do with black people. Why black people are disproportionately affected. Black people are, well, this actually applies to black people. So now they feel as if since that lie has been repeated enough times, now they feel as if they have rhetorical cover for what the next step is. And the next step is, well, we're going to reopen these states, but these black people, we're going to keep an eye on these guys. Well, it is disproportionately among black people. So what that means is we're going to have to make sure that you niggers don't go anywhere. And you better register wherever the hell you go. And papers, you better have papers wherever the world you are. Now we can demand papers from you niggers anytime. And you better have permission to go somewhere. And you better not be out after a certain time. We can have a race-specific curfew, and we can claim, why, this is not about race. It's about the coronavirus. It's what white supremacy's always done. You try to find or invent a particular circumstance or a particular condition that you feel is disproportionately evidenced among black people. And then what you do is you criminalize that circumstance or that incidental. Whatever it is, you criminalize it. And then what you can say afterwards is, as they've always done, well, this is not about black people. This happens to be about marijuana. It's these niggers who are always running around selling drugs, don't you know? That's what it's really about. This is not about black people. That sagging pants ordinance, that's about black people, don't you know? Well, great. We're going to be cracking down on meth use, right? That's a public. No, meth is a public health concern. That's about public health. So with this whole reopening thing that they're talking about, that doesn't apply to black people. That's not about black people. That happens to be a white issue being pushed by white Republicans and Democrats alike, because they know that what's going to happen is this is going to be a selective reopening for white businesses. Whoops, we got to make sure you guys, we don't want to infringe on your racist privilege. We got to make your businesses will be reopened, but the black ones, well, you better hope that your the zoning board and any sort of paperwork you have is in order. And we'll probably find something else that we can shut you down for, because we've got some other issues with you, don't you know? Don't be stupid. Now, a lot of people try to say, well, the reason that this is happening and the reason that there are so many of these white supremacist rubes who are on board with it is because, well, the death count isn't as bad as people thought it was going to be. And even if they did nothing, hell, it's not as if there would be like 50% of the population wiped out or something. Let me tell you something. Even if you had a disease that was wiping out 50% of the population, do you think the white supremacist response would be any different? Are you truly so naive or so stupid that you actually believe that it would be any different? The white supremacists face a condition on a daily basis where they have their children being murdered in school by other Caucasian students. Did you know that March and April were pretty much the only months in like 20 some odd years that there was not a school shooting? Did you know that? Because the schools are closed, what that means is these suburban thugs with their assault rifles, well, they can't go to class and blow each other away, though there have been a large number of killings, mass killings taking place by all sorts of white supremacists in their own homes. So since they can't go to school and vent their violent urges and impulses, they're doing it at home with each other. Maybe that's the reason why they want to reopen the businesses. They're like, hell, we got to escape. These kids are at home and they're killing us. Maybe there's more than one motive at work here, I suppose. But you look at what's going on here. This is a white supremacist protest that you see taking place. This has nothing to do with, well, we're going to be responsible about, please, responsible and white supremacy do not belong in the same sentence. There's not going to be any sort of social responsibility. What this is about is the white supremacists have made a calculated decision. And the calculation happens to be that they are willing to allow a number of them to be killed if that's the cost of making sure that their economic edge does not get eroded. Because that's what this is about. This is about making sure that the wealth gap, this is about making sure that the resource gap, this is about making sure that the money that they've always enjoyed continues to flow to them no matter what. And that's going to require active effort on their part. That won't be a passive process. Sure, there's a large amount of it that's passive, but it's not passive in its totality. But I don't want any of you getting fooled on the point that what you're seeing, regardless of how much grassroots rube support it may have, no matter how many of these back of the woods lumpkins and hayseeds and inbreds may be willing to put themselves out there for this foolish stunt, please don't forget that there's big white supremacist money behind this. This was not a grassroots effort. It was AstroTurf, put together by men who have the resources to be able to arbitrarily start flooding the internet and to be able to reach out to certain people in media and get this particular talking point out there that everybody needs to be at the appointed place at the appointed time. That's what this is about. Organized white supremacist money has a particular outcome that they want to see. And as far as they're concerned, they've already made their peace with the fact that there's a whole lot of old white supremacists who are going to be sent off to that cavern in the sky, or perhaps the one down below. And they've made their peace with that. When white supremacy is attempting to achieve some sort of objective, it has never had a problem throwing either its elderly or, in the case of the two world wars, throwing its young into a meat grinder. White supremacy has no problem having to have a mass burial of white people if it feels that that is merely the cost of doing business. Hell, as far as these white supremacists are concerned, you read what Robert Mercer was saying. What a lot of these white supremacists have been saying. Hell, a lot of these older white supremacists that they're talking about, these old folk, these people are taking money that they feel that the white supremacist 1% feels should be going to them. What do we need Social Security for? Hell, if all the old people are dead, then we can go ahead and allocate less money to Social Security. That's how the 1% see this. This is an opportunity to take some of those old folk off the public dole. That's how they see this. This is an opportunity to clean house, and white supremacy has never, ever been bashful about the necessity for that. See, you have a problem with mass graves. You have a problem with seeing people die before their time. You have a problem with bodies piled up at the morgue. White supremacy, bodies piled up, hell, ain't that one of their little old heavy metal songs? Let the bodies hit the floor? Hell, let the bodies hit the floor and be stacked up like cordwood. That is white supremacy's stock and trade, happens to be piling up the bodies. Mass graves, that's part of white supremacy's MO. That's standard operating procedure. Gotta break some eggs to make that omelet. They use that term, but when they talk about breaking eggs, they're talking about ending lives. See, white supremacy believes in the idea of a number of them will have to die in order to get or in order to maintain. That a long time ago. Now you happen to get squeamish at the prospect of the hospitals being full and overflowing with the dead and the dying. That happens to be a nightmare scenario for you. The only thing white supremacy wonders about is, so how long will it take us to dig more rows for mass graves at Potter's Field in New York? That's the only thing white supremacy cares about. Hey, can we pass a law saying just have these guys mass cremated? Can we do that instead? You got damn near an American Holocaust jumping off, and the white supremacists ain't batting an eyelash, and the white media is not getting too squeamish about it either. The white media doesn't seem to be too bothered by it. These protests, which are nothing more than pathogen proliferation parties, is what they're doing in Lansing and Wisconsin and a couple other places. You would think that you would have the National Guard brought out if for no other reason than, hey, we can't have you guys getting together like this. You're deliberate. And on top of that, you're doing this in traffic where you idiots are deliberately, a large number of you are deliberately coming in contact with a whole bunch of people in traffic. That is a recipe for disaster. That is an absolute recipe for having another spike in cases. This is a recipe for spreading the virus. Florida, same thing. White media is going to be very careful that we don't do the public responsibility sermon whenever we're talking about all of these throngs of white people who are running around with sweating all over each other, bare-skinned, rolling all on each other all in the sand. Here they are in the same body of water, and you know it ain't cleaning them worth a rip. So that being the case, we're not going to talk about public responsibility. You got all these people out there, none of them with face coverings on, by the way. Just masses of people circulating amongst each other, absolutely nothing to stop those particles from being breathed into the air and other people ingesting them. Same thing going on in Lansing, Michigan. Practically none of these rubes had any sort of face protection. Now, it's very interesting because usually whenever these white supremacists get together, they like to have their faces covered. Usually these white supremacists are running around with some sort of balaclava, or they're running around with some sort of face mask on, usually something with a skull on the front, you know. That's one of their favorite little things. Whenever these animals get together, these white supremacists, usually the first thing they have on is some sort of face covering. They're always trying to hide their faces. Except here they are up in Michigan, and it's snowing up there. Can you believe that? This late in the year. But even though it's cold as hell up there, these guys don't have face coverings on. A lethal, contagious, airborne virus that gets passed around that potentially can be passed around if you're less than 6 feet away from somebody, and yet ordinarily the face covering that normally is the absolute requisite bit of apparel that the white supremacist always has in their fashion arsenal, and yet practically none of them are wearing face coverings now. I guess they lost their balaclavas, huh? I guess they lost their face masks, huh? I guess they misplaced them somewhere, huh? No, they're doing this across the board as a political statement. The laws do not apply to them. It would be one thing if they said, okay, we're going to do a demonstration to show that we'll follow the rules as far as social distancing goes and covering your faces goes. We'll do what we can to minimize the transmission of the virus, but you got to let up on us on the businesses. We'll all be out here to show, hey, we know the rules. We all know the drill by now. We're going to have our washing our hands and everything, but you got to open up the businesses. It would be one thing if they were doing that, but they're making it clear we're not obeying any of these rules. And what, do you think that once they get their way that all of a sudden they're going to discover religion and start following rules again? The hell they will. What this happens to be about is, as far as they're concerned, the rules don't apply to them. And then you wonder how the bubonic plague wiped out a quarter of Europe. See, Ebola ain't wiped out a quarter of Africa, but the bubonic plague wiped out a quarter of Europe. And by the way, the Spanish flu, which is actually the Kansas flu because it originated in Kansas, how do you think it spread like wildfire? Just saying. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out because I think the point hopefully has been made and you need to be aware of what's going on here. This white supremacist funded effort to try to reopen all of these non-essential businesses, the entire point behind that is to get back to business as usual for the white supremacists. For white society, that's supposed to be for them. This is going to be their green light. They are going to be made an exception to all of this, but there's still going to be the same rules and strictures and restrictions in place for black people. That's what this is about. This is about moving forward with the double standard. This is about making it clear, okay, we're going to go ahead and let up on everyone who's classified as white, but as for the black people, well, the rules are still in place for you. Oh, don't think those travel restrictions and any sort of statewide bans that are in place, don't think that that's going to all of a sudden be lifted. It won't. And don't think that any sort of harassment that black people have been getting about not having their faces covered or who's coughing or what have you, don't think that all of a sudden that'll be disregarded. See, that's going to be disregarded for white people, but for black people, oh, you better be social distancing and you better have your faces covered and a million other things. That won't be changing where black people are concerned. This is supposed to be moving the ball toward that goal because that's what the goal is. And don't waste your time trying to get some sort of consistency from the white supremacists. As Neely Fuller has always said, white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the argument. Same way they have on drugs, same way they have on gun crime, same way that they are with everything else. The very same anti-black template that they use for every other issue and every other circumstance is going to be played out line by line and word for word here. And do not expect to see any of the black misleadership class taking the hard line on this. Don't expect to see them doing any sort of legislative traffic jams in the state houses of the U.S. Congress. Far as they're concerned, as long as white supremacy gives them a couple of dollars and they get access to their mistresses, usually white, or if they get access to whatever other little crumbs that they think white supremacy is going to give them, they'll go ahead and sell black folks up the river. See, the black bootlick class, they're suicidal. They don't give a damn about rights or power. But the rest of us, the rest of the former slaves who actually know where it's at and what it's got to be, we're not supposed to be that stupid. Be aware of what it is that you're seeing. Be aware of who it's coming from. Be aware of where this stuff originated. Be outraged, but also be determined. As black folks, we are all we've got. Nobody's going to advocate for you except for other black people, so it is important that we be organized and unified. See, the white supremacists understand the value of getting on code. That's what you're seeing happening right now. You got the business class and the 1% who are making it clear, hey, there's a racial hierarchy that's at work here. The strength of white supremacy is its economy, and you are probably making some cuts that are a little bit too deep for our comfort. We need to have it where the strictures are going to be in place on black people. And they're going to be lifted on everyone else, particularly those classified as white. That's what they're hoping to move towards. That's what they're attempting to put in place here. And the coronavirus is going to be a racially designated illness, but it's going to be criminalized. You got the first criminalized virus now, and it's going to be criminalized based on race, with the lie that, oh, well, it's black people. Black people have all this coronavirus, and black people, they're the ones who disproportionately are represented, blah, 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 blah. No, my friends and family, we're going to have to make sure we push back against all this crap and push back hard. That's the reason why you cannot slack up when it comes to your support, when it comes to your promotion of black media. Because the white supremacists got together with their right-wing hate radio pals and the websites that they own and the TV stations that they set up, and they use that as their own white supremacist transmission medium for this garbage. You need an equalizer, but nobody's going to make that happen except for you. There is a battle of wills going on, a tug of war between justice and white supremacy. And you need to make sure that you're on the right side of that tug of war, and you need to make sure that you're pulling with everything that you got. The white supremacists have shown that they know that their cousins and their neighbors and their siblings and their in-laws or inbreds that they have in the police departments and these sheriff departments and these politicians, they're going to go ahead and cover for each other and protect each other. Now, we could have the exact same thing, but the thing is, we're going to have to take the initiative. That means we're going to have to select who it is who's supposed to be representing us. That's where this is supposed to be going. 2020 needs to be the year where we start putting some points on the board. Start having some black folks who have decided, you know what? We have gotten to the point now where we've got a critical mass of black people with their heads on straight. We have a critical mass of black people who are able to get the word out about those who understand exactly what black empowerment is and are actually able and willing to stand for black empowerment, who are going to be able to use the levers of power in order to make sure that black people get the same treatment that everybody else gets. Instead of the law being weaponized against us, it's actually going to be protecting us. And instead of black people being singled out for abuse, we are going to be able to be left alone and unmolested because those who are in charge are going to understand that's their job, and they will carry out that job because they understand that black power put them there and that black power will punish them if they transgress us. But you take a look at those white supremacist protests in Michigan and Wisconsin. White supremacy fully understands that its power is based on its economy. It fully understands that it dies without that. The only way the white supremacy is going to keep their little con game going is they got to keep this little racial Ponzi scheme going long as they can. But that means that the economic wheels, such as they are, have to keep turning. You can't allow the wheels to fall off. And that their economic power means more to them than their lives. It means more to them than the lives of their parents. They'll gladly go ahead and bury mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. And hell, some of them may up their minds, we'll bury our kids if that's the case. They've made their peace with that. White supremacy is suicidal, but it is also extremely driven. And even if you feel that these guys are on the wrong track, that's fine. But it's going to take an organized and a substantively funded effort on the part of the black people of this country in order to fight back against this. You're not going to be fighting back against the massive money that organized this grassroots insurrection against the law. You're not going to be able to tear that apart if you just sit back thinking somebody else is going to fight for your power and fight for your freedom. It doesn't work that way. The white supremacists are serious about what they want. They're doing this in the face of a pandemic, and they're proud of this. As far as they're concerned, they're showing how fearless they are. What they're showing is the severity of their intent. Why, we will go out in the face of a lethal virus and demand that businesses that we have are supposed to be able to suck up as much money, that business as usual continue. Because that's what this is about. This is about making sure that the status quo remains in place. When Donald Trump said that he's a wartime president, he sounded just like that racist punk Patrick Lynch in New York when he was saying the NYPD is now a wartime department. He was saying that because you had some black folks protesting the police indiscriminately murdering black people. That makes them a wartime police department. Well, that being the case, he saw that they lost the war. But when Donald Trump used that language, he understood exactly what it was. The dog whistle language was clear to the rank and file white supremacists. Race war's on. And you see that the white supremacists have taken to the streets guns in hand. They took the guns. They didn't take the guns because they care about the Second Amendment. It's all about intimidation. It's to let you know that we are armed, and you know what happens when a white supremacist has got his hands on an assault rifle. So unless you want some indiscriminate mass shootings to take place, you better bow down to what we say. That's what happens whenever these white supremacists, whether it be in the past, in the 19th century, the 20th century, and even today, when the white supremacists are out there with their guns, that's sending a message. And the message is, unless you want a civil war in the streets, unless you want an armed mass insurrection to take place, a violent upheaval to take place, we're armed and ready to shoot some bullets. That's what we're out here for. So you better do what we say or else. It's an intimidation tactic, a coercion tactic. But there's not much to coerce because a large number of these so-called lawmakers are actually on the same page. And usually they are supporters and backers, and they have coordinated with these white supremacists. You don't need to intimidate much of the government when much of the government is who put you up to these stunts in the first place. So please don't be fooled by what all is going on. Understand who put these clowns out there. Understand who's backing them up and what it is that they're really fighting for. They're not fighting for freedom or liberty or rights. They don't give a damn about that. White supremacy can give less than a damn about freedom. Everywhere white supremacy's ever gone, it has stamped out freedom, it has crushed liberty, and it has suppressed rights. What they care about are their economic goodies, giveaways, and guarantees. That they do care about. White supremacy is willing to risk their lives for it, and if necessary, willing to die in order to maintain their economic stranglehold. Our job is to make sure that they lose that stranglehold no matter what the cost to them.